This is Transqat, a safe space to stand. Transgender issues, queer people, respectful conversations. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat.
I'm Shari. I've been doing some bi advocacy work for quite a while now, probably about 15, 20 years. I can't quite remember exactly how much. But part of that, because of my own journey, trying to figure out my bisexuality. And I have had meetup groups along the way, a bi trans queer meetup group, and then a bi plus discussion group. And I currently kind of caretake for the Bi Plus Connecticut Facebook page, which is run by the New Haven Pride Center, but I'm the only administrator on that. So I try to put all sorts of LGBTQ plus related information that can be helpful for the Bi Plus community that's happening here in Connecticut.
Amanda, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's great to be back. I'm Amanda Redfern. I use she and they pronouns. I am the program director at Triangle Community Center. So I oversee all the programs and the special events that we do there. I'm also the facilitator on our biweekly virtual bisexual and kind of a multi-sexuality group, which we call BICON Social and Support Hours. And yeah, and I'm the resident bisexual person at work, and
So you are just a repository of information.
I mean, I think as we'll probably get into, no two bi people are alike. So I try to wave the flag and kind of represent, but within my lane.
Shari, when we were emailing and setting this up back and forth, I noticed in your email you used the phrase bi plus. And as a language person, I thought maybe we should start there.
Bi plus refers to there's bisexual, there's pansexual, there's omnisexual, and there's slight variations within them. There are also terms that are being evolved as we speak. And there's understanding too that trans people can be bi, that ace people can be bi. There's lots of fingers where it can go, so that's where the plus goes into. Some people just, I know some bi people that just like queer.
Yeah, sort of an umbrella term, right?
So, in fact, I have my shirt on today. I can queer.
Could we maybe delineate among some of those? So, bisexual, dating back about 30 years, referred to, either bi, to, that you were attracted to both genders. But how do we distinguish that from pan or allisexual or omnisexual?
If I can do a little bit of a long walk from my experience, because I'm old, right? So 5. So I've seen an evolution that maybe young people haven't seen. I was born in 1960. The 60s, it was never talked about, of course, except for maybe slurs, maybe.
Right.
And then in the 70s, it started to come out a little bit more. If anything, gay was talked about. It was very, oh my God, we're talking about this. And then in the 80s, it was the only bi person kind of out there was David Bowie. That was like the only bi thing we had. And it wasn't only that he was bi, it was that he was androgynous. He was kind of non-binary, and that freaked people out too. And then that blurred what is bisexual. Anyway, I realized I liked women. So for the longest time, I figured, oh, I must be lesbian because I didn't really know about bi because it wasn't. And so for a long time, I identified as as lesbian. And then it was later down the road, like in the late 90s, I'm like, oh, some guys are, okay. So then I realized that, and, bi was starting to get a little more traction. Oh, okay, well, maybe that's my lane. Okay. So then I realized there's this other thing, pan. But, it took me so long to get to the identity of bi that I really didn't feel like going through all the mental and emotional anguish of, like, saying I'm pan, because I'd already gone through so much. So that's why I'm sticking with bisexual. The terms of bisexuality and of pan have also just kind of changed. There's a lot of layers to bi, and maybe I want to let Amanda have a speak before going on.
So I think I mirror Shari's kind of input in saying that, like, bisexuality was like, it was a way to delineate, like, okay, somebody who's into both, right? Both, the idea of both. And so I think coming off of that, then, like, I think originally pansexuality was like a way to kind of gather everybody outside of just, people who consider themselves within a binary gender. But as I've come to know it and talking to, other queer people, a lot of times folks will kind of say, well, I'm bi because my attraction to different genders is different. Like, I might look for something in a particular gender that I don't look at it another way, or I might have a different level of attraction this way or that way. And versus somebody who's pan, who, again, I hear it the most, who are like, I don't see myself having a type. Like, I go, like, gender has no play in anything. Like, I'm an equal opportunity person. I go into a space, gender doesn't have a place, like, it doesn't weigh in for me. And I think, and again, in addition to being like more inclusive of like queer identities and non-binary or trans identities, but I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. And I think I've also met people who are bi who are like, oh yeah, gender doesn't matter to me. I use bi because that's classic. People understand it. It's what I've come to feel comfortable with. I don't want to complicate things. And then I've seen people who are saying that they're, who are pansexual, identify as pansexual, and are like, well, I'm pansexual, but I'm not, I've yet to find attraction to this particular type of person. And I'm fine with saying that I'm pan because I'm open-minded to the idea that, like, I could, or things might change, or they just like the concept of pansexuality differently. And I, as I said earlier, I think people's relationship with queer labels is very personal. I usually kind of compare it to religion. Like, people can say, well, I'm Christian, or I'm Jewish, or I'm Hindu, and they're relationship with that, what that means to them could be very different than other people who, are within this religion. And I feel the same way about queerness, because I think you can get 100 bisexuals in a room and they will all define their relationship with bisexuality differently. And I think you could say it for a lot of other people too.
And what I'm hearing from both of you, Shari, I think you actually used this word, is that it's a journey as well. That if you have, Amanda, those 100 bi people in a room today, the way they describe that relationship with bisexuality will almost certainly be different if we pull them back together 25 years from now.
Definitely. I mean, I know my own relationship with bisexuality has changed, and gender identity has changed and things. And I think, it's the argument about like the immutability of sexuality and gender, and this idea that you are always at the same pinpoint of your relationship with it throughout all of your life, which I think some people are, but I think there's a large amount of people who, that shifts, or at least their connection with it changes.
My journey, again, being older, being in a different phase of watching everything develop in the 80s, 90s even, trans wasn't really talked about. Still, unfortunately, but it wasn't. And so how would I know if I could be attracted to a trans person if I never met one?
If you didn't even have that vocabulary to apply to a person if you met one.
Exactly. So I think, and I have some interesting things to say, I think the development of bisexuality is including more genders, not just this very only attracted to cis men and cis women. The latest from Robin Fox, who is a very good bi advocate, probably one of the biggest right now out of Boston. Her latest definition, and her definition has changed. Her latest definition is, I call myself bisexual because I acknowledge that I have in myself the potential to be attracted, romantic and or sexually, to people of more than one gender, not necessarily to the same time, at the same time, in the same way, or to the same degree. So that's definitely not saying you're attracted to cis men and cis women. The other one that I refer to quite a bit is from 1990, from the Bisexual Manifesto, which was written in the Bay Area Bisexual Network. So this is going back to the 90s, and it's arguing that bisexuality has always been about being attracted to all genders. So they write in 1990, bisexuality is a whole, fluid identity. Do not assume that bisexuality is binary or duogamous in nature, that we have two sides, or that we must be involved simultaneously with both genders to be fulfilled human beings. In fact, don't assume that there are only two genders. Do not mistake our fluidity for confusion, irresponsibility, or an inability to commit. Do not equate promiscuity, infidelity, or unsafe sexual behavior with bisexuality. Those are human traits that cross all sexual orientations. Nothing should be assumed about anyone's sexuality, including their own.
I think that's probably where we should go next in terms of what are some of the misconceptions, misrepresentations, because I pull this off the paper here so I get it accurately. I went back to the August 92 Time magazine cover, which was just amazed and startled that they had discovered this new thing called bisexuality. And reading through the article again was kind of painful, because of it was very much a group of people from the center looking out at folks on the margin and just making up possible stories for them. So the author asks whether this is, and I'm quoting here, an unnatural byproduct of confusion and repression among homosexuals, or is it a pragmatic response when passion is thwarted by culture and circumstance? Way to immediately other people. There's a phrase in there somewhere about asking whether or not this is just something about straights with a taste for adventure. So let's toss back and forth a little bit about what are some of the misconceptions that people have about bisexuals?
There is a definite fluidity in bisexuality. And that, as it says in the Bisexual Manifesto, is that, oh, you've just confused. There's actually a lot of gay rhetoric, unfortunately. The gay men tend to think, there's no really bisexual men. You're just on your way to being gay. You just don't know it. So unfortunately, we get that. But the fluidity, I get it in a way. We're trying to keep saying we're not confused, but there's times when it really can fluctuate. And I've experienced having my head spinning, especially when I went through a midlife crisis. I'm like, and I was married to a man, and I'm like, I'm never going to be with a woman again. Oh my God, what's going on?
That is a sad thought. That thought that I'm never going to be with a woman again. And yeah.
No, it's real, and the fluidity is real, and I understand why. I get that some lesbians don't want to be with bis because there's that fluidity that they could be unsure of, and I kind of get it. But on the other hand, it's like bisexuals are certainly very possible to have monogamous relationships.
Yeah, I think at the root, a lot of the, they're just in denial or they're confused. I think at the root of that is just really just misogyny, right? It's this idea that, well, bi men are just, they're in denial because they really just want men, but they're pretending to be interested in women and like just save themselves, right? And also it's flipped over where, for bi women and bi femmes, then it's suddenly, oh, well, they're really just doing it for attention. They're not really interested in women. They're just doing it because guys like it, right? So it comes back down to obviously the prize is a man. The prize is a cis man. Like that's what we all know, that's what we want, right? So that is like, we're just going to come up with our own ideas about why that doesn't look like that, which again is like such a disservice to people. And yes, there is a fluidity, and yeah, there is, you look at statistics about bisexual people tend to be in heteropassing relationships, and you wonder why that is, right? Is it out of convenience? Is it, is it out of denial for themselves? Like what, is that just how they roll the dice? Is it because of like Shari said, them not being in homosexual passing relationships because of the stigma within the queer community? Like there's a lot of reasons for it, but it's so often not, just, because they're confused or they're in denial. And I think you can talk to most bi plus people and see that to be true. Again, even if you do go through different periods of your life where you're questioning or you're, experimenting, or you find yourself with somebody and you're like, is this the person I want to be with for, forever? I think those are all normal things that everybody goes through. It just has a different flavor when you're bi.
Hi, folks. It's Clare with 5 reasons you should support Transqat with your donation or a sponsorship. Number 5. Our company jet can't use the cheap fuel. Number 4, every time you listen but don't donate, a chipmunk tries heroin. Number 3, Transqat will never start a war in the Middle East. Number 2, the owls are not what they seem. And the number 1 reason you should support Transqat. If you don't, my cat Newt will come to your house and yak on your carpet.
Well, the Pew Research Center says that within the LGBTQ community, 62% of people who identify as LGBTQ also identify as bi, and yet only 19% are out. And that to me speaks of the power of stigma and how that sort of, I don't know if shame's the right word, but that sort of internalized biphobia has been put on folks. So why might folks be less willing to come out and be in, Amanda, you were saying a queer seeming relationship?
Yeah, I mean like a queer passing relationship
or queer passing relationship. Yeah. So what would make someone less likely to come out as that, as opposed to just you're out as lesbian, you're out as gay?
I mean, in my experience of what I've heard from folks is there's a lot of imposter syndrome about if you feel queer enough. Again, like there's people who've like gone their whole life with, you know, a particular gendered partner, and they're like, well, I have thoughts or I have feelings or I've had crushes, but I don't know if it's enough, and I don't have my, you know, my spreadsheet of equal numbers of these types of genders, and so I'm not queer enough, and I don't look that queer enough, and I'm not, you know, and so I don't deserve these spaces. I don't deserve to be in these places. I don't even just know if I deserve to be called bisexual or call myself bisexual. And I see that so much because I think we all have this very specific idea of what it means to be queer, to look queer, to act queer, to have a queer name, to have a queer relationship, and to engage with queerness, that like folks often feel like if they don't fit into that, then they can't come to the party at all. You know, and I think that that goes for not just the good things, right? Like, do I feel like I belong at Pride, but also like, do I feel like I'm suffering the same way that you know, my lesbian friend is suffering when she got kicked out of her house because you know, she was dating her girlfriend for the first time, or you know, my trans coworker who, you know, got denied housing because they were outed in their paperwork. Like, you know, like, am I, you know, like, am I feeling the pain that also comes with queerness sometimes? Like, am I feeling that enough? Like, do I, you know, is it enough? And I think that imposter syndrome kind of goes into so many things and makes them feel like they can't engage in these spaces, they can't use these labels, you know, and they're afraid to go into spaces like that where they might be challenged with the same thoughts and feelings and attitudes that are going on inside of themselves, being lobbed at them, because that can happen. You know, there definitely are biphobic people, and people who are going to, you know, you're not a gold star this or a gold star that, and you don't have, you know, things like that. So I think it's tough. It can be tough, and I think that's, to me, like that's what I hear most folks talking about.
Shari, one of the things that it dawns on me, and we are of a similar age, is that that sort of fragmentation within the community wasn't as big a thing back in the 70s and 80s because, as you were describing, we didn't have that diversity of language where everybody could sort of be in their own little cubicle and really want to hang on to that identity. We were all just kind of, I mean, in the 70s, the only word we had was gay. Do you see that as kind of like the flip side of having more information available to us?
But what I was thinking of with all of this was, I know people that have been bi advocates who were with a same-sex partner who said they would just say gay rather than bi because it was just easier, you know, because there is a lot of stigma, there is a lot of biphobia even within our community, unfortunately. I wish there wasn't, but I get it that they finally said, oh, you know, and there was a meme going around for a while that said, every time you say you're gay or lesbian instead of bisexual, you have to put $1 in the pot, you know, because it, it was just it was easier, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and there's memes like every time you come out, it's an act of bi advocacy because it feels like it's harder somehow to come out as bi than it is as gay or lesbian. But yeah, we've been dealing with that type of evolution. Oh, I was going to say, in fact, I really have gotten more support from the straight community coming out as bi than
Really?
frankly from within the LGBTQ community. Yeah, there's a lot of, I had one person on Facebook that, you know, because I dig on, which is why I kind of do some advocacy. Like I might dig a little bit down, you know, like somebody on Facebook kept calling it the LGT community. I think it was a gay guy. I can't be sure, but they just kept calling it the LGT community.
It doesn't get much more deliberate than that.
Oh, total bi erasure. Yeah.
I think statistics also show that the younger generation, and help me out, young person, in this conversation. I'm a tail end baby boomer, and then where does it go from there? I know there's a Gen Z and a millennial and some new thing. What do we know how that goes?
Yeah, boomers, Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, and then I think we were at Gen Alpha is like the youngest folks we have right now. I think. Don't quote me.
Wow. Okay. So I've missed two or three generations, is what you're saying. I wasn't paying attention. Within that millennial and Gen Z framework, my understanding is that these folks are a lot more comfortable with the existence of bisexuality and with identifying with it to whatever degree on the spectrum they might feel comfortable. So I wonder if some of those same prejudices will be there a generation or two down the road when we're gone and they're the elders. Do we see the trend going that way, do you think?
I can give you a little kind of anecdote that we had a like teen and tween group for bi plus kids. Um, I held space for it for God, like probably almost 2 years, and I had maybe one parent reach out about possibly having their kid in it, but other than that, nothing. The kids weren't interested in it. They didn't need a space that was just for bi plus kids because they and like that was support oriented. Like they didn't need that because like there it was a non-issue in so many other spaces. And now granted, like that's not the case for everybody in every particular like every queer kid in every queer space. But considering like the difference between like our trans youth group that we had been going on at the same time and how many like how much interest we had in that and like peers supporting each other and being supported in trans identities versus the bi plus group like bi pan omni sexual kids, there just wasn't anything. And I like to use that as an example of like maybe nature is healing. And if if you're creating a space for this that's again support oriented, like and they're not needing support in it, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I'd love to see that as being something, that we see, expanding more in the future. I think again from a millennial standpoint, as I'm somebody who's like a proper smack in the middle millennial, like I think we still see a lot of stuff, especially in the dating world. Um, and but I think we have a lot more bisexual representation in media. I think it's again, like Shari says, it's much easier to come out to the straight community as being bi than it might have been, 20, 30 years ago. And I think we're at least talking about bi erasure more and biphobia more than we had been in the past. I think there's still work to do, but yeah, I'm optimistic about future generations, I think, and facing the same stigmas.
Yeah, I'm to that in a different way. Because again, my journey, I was trying to have some self-discovery and I wasn't finding it in the pride groups, unfortunately. In fact, I went to a pride group that was for lesbian and bi women. That was the title. This was lesbian and bi women. And when I went in and said I was married to a man, it was clear the leader was upset. Because that's also part of what I've experienced is, oh, we're supposed to go to these groups just representing half of us, the half that likes women, and we can't be our whole selves. And that was at least, I don't know, that was maybe 10 or 15 years ago. So within recent memory, but I think even that's hopefully gotten better. But what I was doing in the 2000s and whatnot, it's going, in 2010s was going into, I have blessed to have some extra money. And so I was going into Pride, Middletown Pride, some other Pride events, having my own table for Bi Plus with brochures that I would pay to, there was some available online through bi.org or whatnot. And I would print them out. I bought pin and buy bracelets, pins. I just give it out because I always thought that was part of our visibility because we're so invisible, even though we're the largest group within the LGBTQ+ community. And how come we're not showing ourselves? And I think we do still have a problem with not showing yourselves, that by people not showing themselves as much, coming out or feeling they need to discuss this. So anyway, that was part of my journey so I could learn. And I felt so at the time not represented by my own pride groups. And I said, well, I'll start my own. And I'm sure there must be others out there that need some help. So I'm glad to see that Triangle Community Center has now been for a while doing some by Zoom groups, consistently. I appreciate that, but I really had to fight to try to get some. First time I walked into the New Haven Pride Center, again, years ago, let's say 15 plus years ago, they had a table laden with brochures, laden, and not one was for bi, not one. So, I'm glad to hear that it's gotten to a point where, oh, okay, it's just become part of the norm and that we don't even have to have these social groups.
What I hear informally from a number of the sort of support and nonprofit groups around the state is that what started in the 90s as, in schools, GSAs, they would call them, right? Gay straight alliances, have really morphed along the lines, Amanda, of what you were saying, that the kids who identify as gay and lesbian, not saying they have it easy or they've got a free ride, but they don't really feel like they need that kind of support anymore. And so GSA becomes Gender Sexuality Alliance. And if you attend these support groups, you're much more likely to find trans and non-binary and ace folks trying to wrestle with the same sorts of things that gay and lesbians did in the 90s.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially too, I think you're more likely, and this isn't obviously for everybody because people's experiences are different, but I find that so many folks, when they come out, like they're coming out in high school or middle school, they kind of know already. And like you're saying, like there is a little bit less of a hurdle now to come out as gay or as lesbian, again, depending on your cultural background and where you live and everything. But like there's a little bit less of a hurdle for that. And I find that the same kind of kids are still wrestling with the well, why am I so drawn to the GSA? Why am I finding myself like, am I, and are stuck kind of in that duality of like, well, I know gay and lesbian, I have gay and lesbian friends, and I feel like I'm kind of like that, but I'm not really like that. But I have straight friends, but I feel like I'm kind of like that, but I'm not really like that. And there's just, I think, there is a little bit more of that, like that push and pull and that self-discovery part that's still going on at a time when you might go through your entire high school and have crushes on one particular type of gender and think that that's totally fine. And then you realize in college it's something different, or even after college. And, and so I think the adolescent experience as being bi or like bi plus is different, I think, than a lot of, other sexualities, but which I think has a lot more, like you mentioned, asexual folks. I think it has a lot more parallels to asexual folks and asexuality and aromanticism than sometimes it does to, gay and lesbian orientations, in that same of like is this what I'm supposed to be feeling? Is this not what I'm supposed to be feeling? Like, is there something wrong with me? Why do I not look or feel the same exact way as these other people? And so I think there's something to be said about that too.
Granted, I don't watch a lot of television anymore, but I can only think of one ace character, and it was in a cartoon. And I would probably be almost as hard pressed to name any bi characters in mass media and popular culture. Whereas, anecdotally, people really credit things like Will and Grace with the progress that was made towards marriage equality and LGBTQ rights in general, because you were inviting queer people into your home on a weekly basis and you were laughing with them. And that's, and it was huge when Ellen came out on her TV show, and when Roseanne's show introduced queer characters as just part of this everyday family type of thing. And it became harder and harder to other gay and lesbian people because you were seeing them. And that just isn't happening. It's happening more with trans folks these days, and I'm grateful for that. but I don't see it in terms of bi or ace. So I agree. I see those two as very parallel. Do you guys see any sort of mass media representation of bi folks?
I don't, but I'm not as up on the new shows as I'm sure younger people are, and I hear that it's out there. Um, I I'm late to the streaming game. I was just watching. I just finished watching Star Trek Discovery, which I thought was fabulous on a number of levels. The
So wonderful.
female person of color, and I'm also affected very much in society by being a woman and seeing the inequalities of that. So on that show, women were totally equal to men, and they were totally represented equally. And they did have a non-binary character, which was cool to see. And they had a gay couple, and they have Tig Notaro, who talks about her wife who had passed away. So there was definitely so much going on there, just like matter of factly they were going at it. And I just love that series. So, but I can't, unfortunately, I can't speak to other things. I still just haven't seen a lot of bi specific representation out there.
I would say, I think, we've definitely seen, I think we've seen bi characters. I think oftentimes they're women characters that are bi, and they're kind of painted in they're flaky and they're indecisive and they're messy and they're chaotic. And I think the one I think of like the most that pops in is like Alice from the L Word.
Oh.
And she is that chaotic, flighty, manic pixie dream girl kind of bisexual that gets a lot of, crap from the other characters in the show. And, and I think that there's like, we've evolved a little bit into bisexual or bi plus women characters, it not being a big thing, right? Like, I think, it's a throwaway comment in Fleabag, right? About, oh, I'm not strictly lesbian, and it's, I mean, we have it in Killing Eve, right? There's like, are they, aren't they? Maybe, and I think we see a lot more of it. Like, it's just not a big thing. What I love seeing, what I feel like we're seeing a little bit more is the embracing of bi men in media, which is so super under discussed and underexplored. And there's so much stigma to that. And I think the ones I'm thinking of off the top of my head are Heartstopper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Connor's character in Heartstopper. It's a beautiful journey that you even go through with him as being an adolescent, being a teen, and being like, am I bi? And then actually really truly owning being bisexual. And even just most recently, I'm sure you all have heard of Heated Rivalry. Everyone's talking about that. There is an out, he labels as bisexual character in it. He's one of the two leads and is, like that's just said, like, and it's, and he's bi and he's comfortable with his bisexuality as much as he can be as, like a professional athlete and from Russia. So, but like being able to see bi men and men who are using bisexual as a label for themselves has been really nice. And I think it's something that we're seeing a little bit more of. And at least in current media, I'm seeing less of conversation around, is this woman bi or not? And more of just, okay, well, she's being with multiple people and it's not even a conversation. Like, you're just like, oh, okay. Like, and that's it. And I think it's a nice thing to see compared to, again, like the stereotypes that we see of like, well, they're chaotic or they're unfaithful or they're flaky or they're promiscuous, overly promiscuous. Like, I think it's nice to see that.
Amanda, what you were saying, actually last night I watched the new episode of The Night Manager on Amazon. It's a Tom Hiddleston sort of James Bondy espionage thing. And this season, you can't really tell if he's just being in the character of this undercover persona he's in, but there's a bi through line on that, and I liked that it's just kind of left to, is that sincere? Does his character really feel the attraction to Teddy, or is he needs to get the things done? But at least it raised the question.
Yeah, again, I think we all hope one day. We push for awareness, we push for visibility, and we push for talking about this stuff while it's still issues. And we're still in that, the bi community, we're still in that. Like we're still going to keep pushing for all those things. But eventually the end game for all of us is like that it's not an issue anymore, that we can be bi and we can say we're bi and it's met with, okay, cool. So what do you want for dinner? You know, like and it's not a big thing anymore. I think that's what we all hope for, but like we're going to keep pushing and keep talking about it, and keep pushing for better representation until it's a non-issue. But it's nice when you get to see something normalized, and not be a huge plot point.
The show Fleabag was just referenced, and I think it might be really helpful in terms of advancing this discussion in our culture if Andrew Scott were to really start hitting on me. I think if he were to start, calling and texting and just making it clear what a big crush he has on me, I think that would really help.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'd love Andrew Scott to be bi too, but
Wouldn't
he's well, we'll let the guys have him for now. Who knows?
Shari, one of the things that's worth bringing up, and there again, you and I have lived through certain really rough periods in history, is that is the intersection with healthcare, right? If bi people are unwilling to come out, if only 20% of bi folks are willing to be out and open about that, that means that a fair amount of bi people are not being open with their healthcare providers.
Right, and March is actually Bi Plus Health Awareness Month. And I thought personally, do I need to talk to my GP about being bi? And I've talked to her about it as far as a mental health issue, because gays and lesbians are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than straights. Bis are 8 times more likely.
Wow.
And that's a huge number. And that's one of those things, I think trans is way up there too, One of the things I was kind of had struggles with the New Haven Pride Center when I was trying to work with them, frankly, is they're like, well, it's not a competition. And it's like, no, it's not. I'm not trying to say high suicides are somehow better or not, because there's more of them than gays and lesbians. They were taking it that way. I'm like, no, but bis is the largest group, and don't we feel an obligation to tell bi people so that they know and they can go get the help that they need? So I'm a big advocate about, trying to make that distinction. It's not that we're trying to be somehow better than gays and lesbians, who certainly have problems with suicide too. But for our own health, we need that knowledge. I think bi.org has been pushing for more bi therapists who really know the bi community, not just say, oh, I get attracted to more. There's so much more deeper from therapists that we need than just that surface. Oh, I know. Okay, I support bi people and gay and lesbian and all of that. Certainly, I think if you're promiscuous, within the there's AIDS is still out there, and so some want to talk to their gynecologist or whatever about multiple partners. But if you're bi married, a bi woman married to a man, let's say, you might be afraid to say something like that.
And on the flip side of that is that bi concerns in healthcare don't get the research money.
Yeah, very much so.
Because you don't have the visibility, nobody's advocating to. So when you go into your healthcare provider, they don't necessarily have a database of of previous cases where they can make informed decisions because nobody's collecting the data.
I was pleased when I did talk to my GP about, I'm bi, I have depression, which I rate of depression in bi people, which again leads to kind of that suicidality. And so I was talking to her about it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we were taught about that." I'm like, "You were taught about it, specifically bi?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we." And so I was like really pleased to hear that. And I think she was telling me how her daughter was even bi, and I'm like, "Oh great," So it did open the discussion. You have to be open to saying it, and then the doctors can open up too a little bit because they're not just going to bring it up out of the air.
Yeah, doing the different screenings and understanding the higher correlation between, certain health conditions and like certain sexualities or gender identities, like that's important. Like it's important for us to talk about those things. And I think also, there's an extra kind of burden on bi folks, especially bi folks who are, sexually active and sexually active with different types of bodies and different like body types, because then you've got to know, you might have to know birth control stuff. You might not have to know how to prevent STIs or STDs on two like different types of genitalia, right? You might need to know how to do HIV prevention in different ways that you might not know otherwise. And so having these conversations, like, you should be having these conversations with your doctor and ideally with a doctor who then is going to understand why it's important for you to know this stuff so they can educate you in part. But because otherwise, you have to learn this stuff on your own. And you have to do all that, understanding of being able to know what birth control, what birth controls can fail and how to handle that, but also maybe how do you, how do you get PrEP or PEP, right? Like, and things like that, and understanding all, the different facets of that, and so, yeah, I think there's a lot more going on that we often don't take the time because then you're also getting met with the stigma. And are they going to make you do STI tests every single time you come in because you say you're bi and they make an assumption that you're seeing a bunch of different people, right? Or, are they going to, stigmatize you? Or are they going to, like say really biphobic things to you? Or are they going to poo-poo it and say, oh, it doesn't matter. We don't even have to talk about this. Who cares anyway? Like if you haven't been with this person, like that, it doesn't matter. And they may, like again, to Shari's point, they might even just completely throw it out and be like, oh, I'm not even going to give you any additional mental health screens or take some time to ask how you're doing, even though you are more statistically likely to have mental health challenges, like, because they just, you're in and out in 15 minutes.
So we are coming up on an hour. From each of you, let me see if I can end it with where folks who are looking for more information, looking to educate themselves, either because there's a first person need for that or because you just want to be better informed. Where should folks go?
I will say one thing we didn't touch on a little bit, but I'm by profession a musician, specifically a church organist, and I specifically work at First Church in Middletown. And we are an open and affirming church, which means we've gone through a whole process of accepting people that are different, including certainly including LGBTQ plus people. And I'm openly bi there. We have a minister there now 2 years who is openly trans male. So I know a big thing in the community is, a lot of hatred toward religion, which I totally get. But there are churches that, see you. We have a number of lesbian members, trans members. It's a wonderful thing. South Church down the road is also open and affirming. So I offered that to people that are looking for spirituality, that can be out there. And I know you sometimes have to look. Our church in particular is United Church of Christ. Most United Church of Christ are open. It's a process they all have to individually go through, so you can't say they all are, but that is out there more and more. There is a men's support group that is happening at the Middletown Library, and it's happening. It's called the Bi Plus Men's Support Circle, and it is every other Tuesday, and that is starting January 6th. So, and that's at the Russell Library from 6:30 to 7:30. So that's one of the few that's meeting in person. And I personally run the Bi Plus Connecticut Facebook page. So if you look for that, I do have to approve you. We don't let just anybody in because unfortunately you get some people that, you know, I try to screen them as best I can. But I certainly want people and accept people.
You know, I'm happy to speak to folks about it. You know, I guess as a resident bi person at TCC, I'm happy to talk to folks about things. Again, I also host our virtual support social and support group. It is on for the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month. And it is for 18 and up. It's virtual, it's on Zoom. It's just an hour long, so it's not huge time suck. And it's just a great way to come in and support folks and be supported. And again, if you're questioning or if you need somebody to say, throw your imposter syndrome out the window, you're bi enough, or, you know, like it's, you know, it's a good space to be. So, you know, we have that. And we also do community education. So if you are somebody who says, I would like to learn more about bisexuality stuff, and I'd like that in a presentation format, whether it's to your job or your organization, or maybe, you know, like, you know, a school, we do have community educators who can come and speak on bisexuality specifically, or multisexual, any kind of non-monosexuality, if that's something that you're interested in and you feel would be helpful to folks. You know, so we have that at TCC too. So we're at ctpridecenter.org, and our social media is the same, CT Pride Center. And so you can stay, you know, connect with us that way, or see what we're up to.
What I have found, which I think most people can relate to, is we move through life and we have these experiences that are truly beyond words. And that could be positive or negative. You know, I don't know that I could put into words what holding my first child was like, or being a trauma survivor. And I feel that I can express on a much deeper level those human experiences through my art making. So I think of it as another language that we can all speak. And as art therapists, it's our job to help clients interpret this new language that they're speaking. So you don't need any art experience whatsoever. Everybody can be creative. And we as art therapists will nurture this new language, or maybe it's a familiar language, but we will nurture this creative language and then help our clients process the piece of art that they've just made, which is full of so much wisdom.